Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jam Vishampad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtodhara Shatashi Shivadizavaya Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtodhara Shatashi Shivadizavaya Grace Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gauda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Yamunamai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to the Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Fifth Canto, Creative Impetus, Chapter 14, The Forest of Enjoyment, Text 42. Everybody can please repeat after me. Tasyedam upagayanti arshabasyeha rajasher manasyapi mahatmanaha nanuvart marhati nripo makshikeva Garut Mataha Tasyedam Upagayanti Arshabasye Harajasher Manasyapi Mahatmanaha Nanuvart Marhati Nripo Makshikeva Gurut Mata. Is that the proper? Okay. Okay. All right. Taste. So how would you say that? Tasyedam bhagayanti arshabasyeha rajashir manasyapi mahatmanaha nanuvartmarhati nripo makshikeva gurut mataha. Say it again. Arshabasyeha rajashir manasyapi mahatmanaha nanuvartmarhati nripo makshikeva gurut mataha. Tasya of Jadbharat. Idam, this glorification. Upagayanti, they sing. Arshabasya, of the son of Rishabhadev. Iha, here. Raja Rishehe, of the great saintly king. Manasa api, even by the mind. Mahatmanaha, of the great personality Jadbharat. Na, not. Anuvartma arhati, able to follow the path. Nripaha, any king. Makshika, a fly. Eva, like. Garutmataha, of Garuda, the carrier of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Having summarized the teachings of Jadbharat, Shukadeva Goswami said, "My dear King Parikshit, the path indicated by Jadbharat is like the path followed by Garuda, the carrier of the Lord, and ordinary kings are just like flies. Flies cannot follow the path of Garuda, and to date, none of the great kings and victorious leaders could follow this path of devotional service, not even mentally. Purport. As Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, chapter 7, text 3, manuṣyāṇāṁ sahasreṣu kaścid yatati siddhaye yatatām api siddhānāṁ kaścin māṁ vitti tattvataḥ. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. The path of devotional service is very difficult, even for great kings who have conquered many enemies. Although these kings were victorious on the battlefield, they could not conquer the bodily conception. There are many big leaders, yogis, swamis, and so-called incarnations, who are very much addicted to mental speculation and who advertise themselves as perfect personalities, but they are not ultimately successful. The path of devotional service is undoubtedly very difficult to follow, but it becomes very easy if the candidate actually wants to follow the path of the Mahajan. In this age, there is the path of Śri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared to deliver all fallen souls. This path is so simple and easy that everyone can take to it by chanting the holy name of the Lord. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam Kalau Nasteva 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 Gatiranyata. We are very satisfied that this path is being opened by this Krishna consciousness movement because so many European and American boys and girls are taking this philosophy seriously and gradually attaining perfection. Om Jnana Tivedandasya Karanjana Shalakaya Chakshulamalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Kaditavachalam Pangam Langate Grim Yakipatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Diditanam Vancha Kupatribishta Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation again. Having summarized the teachings of Jadabharat, Shukadeva Goswami said, "My dear King Parikshit, the path indicated by Jadabharat is like the path followed by Garuda, the carrier of the Lord. And ordinary kings are just like flies. Flies cannot follow the path of Garuda. And to date, none of the great kings and victorious leaders could follow this path of devotional service, not even mentally." In the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 7, text 3, Krishna states that out of thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. So the quest for perfection, for someone to be interested in that is very rare, as Krishna is stating here in the Bhagavad-gita. Srila Prabhupada's quoted in the purport. Mostly people are after very base, you could say, base or gross forms of gratification. And especially nowadays with Kali Yuga progressing more and more and more, and people becoming more degraded, which degraded means they become more and more like animals. How they think, how they walk, how they talk, becomes more and more like animals. Or, as we've been hearing in the previous verses, like monkeys. And part of that is them thinking that, oh, I have sensual desires, and for me to gratify the sensual desires, that's the most important thing. and I'm going to do anything and everything to gratify my sensual desires, which becomes very dangerous, right? Because, anyways, we won't get into that so much. So not many people are interested. And then you find a few who are. You find some who are, right? But then when they come to the path of Krishna consciousness, it is undoubtedly difficult, as it's being mentioned here. It's difficult. And due to immaturity or weakness of heart, people may give up the practice of Krishna consciousness. And instead of dancing to the beat of kirtan, they dance to the beat of Maya, right? The mundane music and happenings of this material world, or materialistic society, hedonistic society. So due to immaturity, or due to bad association, because one may be mature to a degree, or even to a very high degree. One may be very mature in their Krishna consciousness, but the power of the illusory energy is very strong, and in bad association, all things could happen. One could ruin their reputation, definitely, within a few minutes. Or so much of what they've worked hard for and got the mercy, that could also be spoiled in bad association. Bad association. Just as good company is very powerful, bad company is also very powerful. Just like Raghunath Das Goswami, one of our great acharyas, the 6 Goswamis, worshipful personality. He writes in this book, Manuṣyāṇāṁ, which Urmila Mataji had an interesting idea. She had that book translated, and then many devotees commented on these verses of Raghunath Das Goswami, Shivaram Swami, and different learned personalities. So it kind of became a big book. If you see the printed version, it's a huge book. But anyways, in one of those verses, he says that the soul is on the path, means moving along the path of Krishna consciousness. And in this particular verse, he paints this picture of the highwaymen. Means like thugs. Sometimes you have in other countries, it happens. They stop you with a gun. They say, "Get out of the car, or we're going to kill you." And people get out of the car, and then they just steal the car, or they hurt the person, and they steal the car. Right? Happens everywhere. Yeah. Dangerous place, the material world. So the moral of the story: don't buy a fancy car. I'm just joking. So in this particular picture he's painting, it says the highwaymen of lust and etc., right? The different bad qualities, different anarthas, who take the form in this verse as thugs. They stop the soul, right? And they try to bind him with ropes and all type, try to hurt him, try to kill him. So in this particular verse, he's saying that, okay, when this happens, what do you do? He says you call out to, some of the translations say Krishna, and some of the translations say the devotees, right? Yeah. You call out. Call to both. And they will surely come to our rescue. In other words, when Maya, or when the illusory energy, or when obstacles present themselves, we have an option. We surrender to Maya, or we call out to Krishna and the devotees. And if we call out to Krishna and the devotees, or if we remember them, then we'll be able to pass the test. Just like just like in Juhu, Mumbai, His Holiness Giraj Swami, as the temple president there, Brahmachari, he long saga, but there's that book, Juhu book, explaining many details. But one of the things that happened is Mr. Nair, the demoniac person who was trying to cheat Srila Prabhupada and hurt the devotees, so many things. Actually, one devotee, Veerabahu Prabhu, Los Angeles, those who know him. Anyways, he said that sometimes he's not so fond of devotees using this term, demon, right? And devotees could be kind of demon, right? Anyways, he said he's not so fond sometimes. But he said when he heard about Mr. Nair, he said, okay, that's a demon. Anyways, but one of the things Mr. Nair did is he, Giraj Das Brahmachari, he was communicated with them and tried to, whatever, this and that. They were going to some office to do some paperwork and etc. And while he got into the back of the car, Giraj Das Brahmachari, this Mr. Nair, he arranged that this society girl was there. And very attractive woman was there. And in the book, he explains how she started to, you could say, kind of try to seduce him. Putting her hand on his leg, and then he said, I was a young man, and my mind was, well, he used the word in a tizzy, and he was saying how then in his mind he thought about Srila Prabhupada, and he said that, how am I going to stain Srila Prabhupada's name by whatever, going any further, right? How am I going to stain Srila Prabhupada's name? He said, I can't do that. In other words, to setting aside sense gratification for the service of the spiritual master, for the reputation of the spiritual master, for the reputation of ISKCON. That's necessary and important. And that's actually, until one learns how to do that, they're not going to be successful in anything. Because everything could either be sense gratification, or practically everything could be sense gratification or service to Krishna. So the idea is to, okay, there's possibilities, opportunities for sense gratification. I'm setting them aside, and I'm serving, right? So this idea of calling out to Krishna is important, to calling out to the spiritual master is important. But it's not automatic, because we have to train ourselves. Just like a Jamil. A Jamil saw, it's not that a beautiful woman tried to seduce a Jamil. He saw it from a distance. He could have just said, all right, that's disturbing. Like one devotee, I remember, we were out on book distribution. We're out on book distribution, UCSD, and this devotee, we were leaving, and he was a brahmachari, and he was chanting japa very intensely. And the devotee said, "What's going on, Prabhu?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just trying to get something out of my mind." He's trying to, and he saw some, whatever, but he was attracted to, or I don't know, man and woman embracing or something like that, which Prabhupada says is happens, unavoidable, practically. So a Jamil, it's not that he saw, which we're going to be reading soon in the 5th canto, it's not that some woman tried to seduce him, but he saw from a distance, and his mind he lost it. He lost his intelligence, he lost his ability to discriminate, he lost any sense of self-control, any sense of morality. his senses and mind just completely hijacked his consciousness, and he just went full throttle, full force into searching out, hunting this woman down and finding her and ditching his Brahmani wife and just going for this woman. And to maintain her, it says he engaged all types of sinful activities, immoral activities. He was a Brahmin. And sometimes, I mean, like, he was a person in the mode of goodness, a pure person, but he just lost it. And somehow or other, he didn't have the training, he didn't have the maturity to call out to Krishna, to call out to his spiritual master. He didn't have it. And therefore his life was spent in just sinful activities. Of course there's a happy ending, but there's not always a happy ending. So okay, great, sounds good. You know, I could just, but there's not always a happy ending, right? People think I could let my senses go and there'll be a happy ending. Not all the time. Most of the time not. So to train ourselves to call out is important, and to always be vigilant, right? We should always be ready for any type of obstacle to come our way. In other words, we should always be strong, spiritually strong. And then whatever comes our way, no problem. No problem means that there might be some disturbance in the mind, but no problem means that we're not going to be completely swept away, and what to speak of waste our whole life. So the price of vigilance, or the price of freedom, is vigilance. We have to be very vigilant, or else at any moment there could be problems. So yeah, it's not easy. It's difficult, and as this particular verse is saying, so many great kings, although they heard about it, knew about it, they couldn't follow it. They're compared to be like flies in the path of says the path indicated by Jedbart is like the path followed by Garuda. The carrier of the Lord and ordinary kings are just like flies. So flies can't follow behind Garuda. Impossible. Flies, very restricted, very constricted. And aside from being restricted and constricted, they are interested in nasty things, right? Garbage, etc. So because people's desires and interests are low, they can't follow the path of Mahajans. So that means that in order to follow the path of Mahajans, we have to transform our taste. We have to transform our attraction to Krishna consciousness. Or else we can't follow the path of Mahajans. We may be able to follow for 2 months, and then we're dancing in OB, right? With all the subhumans, practically. Maybe there's a few non-subhumans there, but we may be able to follow for a few years, right? But in order to really follow the path of Mahajans, just as the flies can't follow the path of Garuda, unless they become a Garuda-like, unless they, I don't know, take a new body or whatever, born again. Similarly, in order to follow the path of Mahajans, we have to transform our taste, because the Mahajans are saying, do this, do this, do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So in order to do what they do, follow them, follow their footsteps, we have to have a similar taste as they do. Just like somewhat recently, myself and one devotee, we had to, go to some store and we were looking for something. And it was a department store, and I'll never go there again. There's some places I'll never go again, but not because it was very expensive, but just because, been there. I was there for a few minutes now. I never have to go again, but we had to pick up something, so we tried a few stores, went to Macy's, went to, Fashion Valley there. We say Passion Valley, right? Went to Neiman Marcus, right? Very high-end store. I don't exactly know why, but there's shoes for like $5,000 and this and that. Anyways, we were walking there, and I'll also never do this again, but some guy, he said, "Oh, here, try out this little," they have a little card, "Oh, here, try it out, some perfume," right? So I said, "All right, whatever." So I, and then while I was smelling it, the guy was starting to say what was supposed to smell like, and it was like, I forgot, what did he say? Cognac. Cognac is, I didn't even know what cognac is, but cognac is apparently some type of alcohol, liquor. So cognac and tobacco. And what was the other one? Vanilla. Terrible. Beyond terrible. So, you'd think that if somebody wanted to smell like tobacco and alcohol, maybe they just smoke and drink. But I don't know. Maybe it's for the people who are following the four regular principles who want to smell like alcohol, and it's stupid, But Kodiak, and so, anyways, I had to rush. We had to rush to the bathroom and wash our hands and wash our nose and try to purify. So it's a lesson. You could learn from hearing too. Of course, I don't know if any of you would want to do that in the first place, but I won't do it again. But you see that it is, what's the taste? Or some people say, "Oh, smells good. Smells great. Tobacco and cognac. All right, I'll pay you $1,000 for that bottle. Sign me up." The path of the flies, right? They have a different taste. Whereas devotees think, that's nasty. That's disgusting. Like, I have to go bathe now, I have to go, chant some Hare Krishna. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, right, even seeing a materialistic person's face, it'd jump in the Ganga, right? Actually, there was that time where he went to this swami's place, and the swami said, "Oh, would you like some," what did he say? "Would you like some Ananda?" And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Nityananda Prabhu, "What is he talking about, Ananda? What is this Ananda?" And Nityananda Prabhu said, "Oh, he's talking about wine." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Oh, all right, I'm out of here." And they both got up, and immediately they said they jumped in the Ganga, So that which is nasty, that which is vile, that which is just gross, etc., for a devotee or for someone trying to be a devotee is very attractive to somebody who's in who's in pure material consciousness or impure material consciousness. And therefore you see that they go a particular direction and the devotees go their particular direction. Just like our tilak, right? If you see, it's a path, right? Going up. You see the lines, they're going up. So that's the path of the devotees. They're heading upwards. It's elevation. Whereas the other path is just, right, downward spiral, as the Bhagavad-gita says, right? What is it? Dayato vishyan pumsa sangaste shupajayate sangat sanjayate kama kroda bijayate. So if we want to follow the Mahajans, which, as stated here, the path is very difficult. practically impossible for a materialist. Just like that king, we're wrapping up here, by the way. Just like that king, right? They said when Prabhupada's godbrothers went to London, "Can you make me a Brahmin?" Right? And that's what the king asked. The Lord, not king, Lord Zetlin, Marquis Zetlin. "Can you make me a Brahmin?" And then the devotees, the sannyasis, the devotees said, "Yeah, we can make you a Brahmin. You just got to follow a few principles, that's all. Simple. No meat, fish, eggs, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication." And in his British accent, he said, "Impossible, right? I can't do it. I can't do it. And he didn't become a Brahmin. Because for them, it's very difficult. Practically impossible, right? So, but for a devotee, they take pleasure in these things. They like it. They can't live otherwise. So that's the idea, is that yes, it's difficult, but the more we become Krishna conscious, the more we're able to follow the Mahajans, and the more it actually becomes easy. So it is simultaneously easy and difficult. But we have to follow the path as chalked out by the acharyas, not some speculative path. Shruti Smriti Puranadi. Rupa Goswami says that we follow the path of the Mahajans, or we follow the path that is chalked out in the Vedic literature, not some speculative path. And sometimes then personalists, they say, "Oh, this path of bhakti, this is for the in modern parlance, this is for the losers," right? Because you can't control your senses, because you can't control your, right? Because you can't take sannyasa immediately, because you can't sit down and read Vedanta, therefore you have to chant Hare Krishna, therefore you have to do all this stuff that is stimulating to your senses, right? Therefore you have to, right, have so much sandesh or rascal or what, because you can't control your senses. But we could control our senses, right? And therefore the path of bhakti is easy. But this is a misconception, because if the path of bhakti is so easy, then why aren't so many people doing it? Means there is some difficulty to it. The actual path means it's not, in other words, it's not a cheap process. And lastly, the main essence of it being is following the Mahajans in this particular age is to, 1, chant Hare Krishna, and 2, to broadcast the holy name of Krishna through Harinam, through book distribution, right? In the books, Krishna's name is there so many times. When people read the books, they're reciting Krishna's name, first in their mind, and then later, hopefully, through japa and kirtan. Prabhupada's trying to convince them through his books to chant Hare Krishna. So to the propagation or the preaching of the holy names and all the spiritual knowledge through book distribution, through following and leading by example. Again, like we mentioned the other day, people, they read so many things in Prabhupada's books, but they want to come and see it lived out, like live, in person. That's Acharya principle. In this way, if we can somehow or other follow, then it becomes more and more easy, and there's a chance of us becoming, reaching perfection and also helping others. So, does anybody have any comments or questions? Yes, Bhajanarayan Swami. We have a...
Well, sounds convincing. And Krishna in the heart of all living entities, as the super soul. When Krishna wants, I'll be able to do it. I want to do it. I agree with it in principle. but now I'm struggling, and by Krishna's grace, when He gives me the inspiration, I'll do it. I'll surrender.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's, much of what people spout, right? Is that a good word? Maybe not. Anyways, much of what people, Hare Krishna. Much of what people you could say, much of what people say for reasons why they can't be Krishna conscious now are excuses. Means they have attraction to impious activities, they have attraction to sinful activities, they have attraction to mundane life, and they use whatever they can, whatever they could find as an excuse. Like there was some statement, I forgot where I read it, but I did read it somewhere. And it was a Krishna conscious book. And I am quoting the essence of it. Sorry for not giving the exact reference, but you could see how it will make sense, but hopefully, right? But there's some statement that, when maybe some devotees give us a hard time, or they say maybe chide us or correct us or this and that, and we just can't tolerate it. It's just intolerable. And on that basis, I'm going to give up Krishna consciousness, practically speaking, and I'm just going to go into mundane life, what I wanted the whole time anyways. But in mundane life, I'm going to take so much hits. I'm going to take so many hits, so many knocks, so much abuse, really, verbal, mostly verbal. Abuse from my spouse, from my boss, from my mind, from tax department. I'm going to take a lot of abuse. Why? Because it's just part of the game. You gotta take a few knocks, in order to enjoy. Just like the donkey, right? You gotta take a few knocks. The master will feed you or whatever. But when it comes to coming to Krishna consciousness, the spiritual master corrects us, or the devotees correct us. Intolerable. I can't take this. I can't take this anymore. But you see that the same thing happens, that they go into material life, and the same thing happens. And I suspect that everybody here that has been in a relationship, means a materialistic relationship, maybe some have had that experience, girlfriend, boyfriend, or friend, or this and that. I mean, there's so much difficulties that they impose on us, and still we kind of tolerate. It's part of the program. But if devotees do that, or if we perceive that Krishna is doing that to us, this is intolerable, right? Why is Krishna doing this to me? So much of the reasons people give for the reasons they can't be Krishna conscious they're just excuses. They just don't want it. Why is it that somebody comes and they're very enthusiastic and they take to the process? They're not going to wait till they're 90 years old to take to the process. Why is it somebody takes to it when they're 15 years old or 14 years old, or maybe they're born into it, right, from very beginning? And some people, they just don't. Why? Because like one woman asked Srila Prabhupada, Swami, why didn't you come early to America? And Prabhupada said, you weren't ready. So there's a reason, and that means that the persons just don't want it. And it's really bad excuses. I mean, they should just say, I don't want it. Don't make up some illogical, silly excuses. Just say, I don't want Krishna. Just say it. I want Maya. It's more honest. Just like you have people, oh yeah, I'll surrender to Krishna when I'm old. No, you won't. Because, first of all, that's an excuse. I mean, people who know about Krishna, right? They're in the fold. They may have some devotee association. They may be religious. They may be pious. I'll surrender to Krishna when I'm older, right? When I'm older. When you're older, I mean, this is hurting, that's hurting, right? And because you have not trained throughout your life, the beautiful grandchildren are there, you know, so many health problems are there. The mind is preoccupied. If you have training, there may be pain and this and that, there may be grandchildren, whatever. But because you have training throughout your life, you know how to be Krishna conscious. But without that training throughout your life, to think you're going to surrender to Krishna, while knowing about it and putting it off for so many years, it's not likely. Of course, there's always miracles, but so therefore, Prahlad Maharaj says to start at the earliest as possible, right? Ideally, as a young child. Of course, if somebody comes later, fine. It could happen. We could be Krishna conscious, but ideally, as soon as possible. And if we haven't started seriously by this time, we could start right now, right? On the other hand, it's never too late, but I'm just trying to, different angles of vision. So yeah, this is, most of it's just an excuse. Also, on this note, I mean, the Vedic literature says one should retire. One should retire from family life. What does that mean? It means that they shouldn't just keep on working for money throughout their whole entire life. It means they should stop. And hopefully they've, worked it out in such a way where they can do that. We have a good example here, our money, right? He was working and he stopped. Now he's, right, taking care of the garden, so many things. So it's important to do that, because sometimes devotees in the household ashram, they say, oh, it's difficult, it's painful, it's this and that. I'm spending so much time with my family and I have so many social obligations and, I'm working so much, right? I'm tired of working. All right, well, stop. I mean, if you can, stop working. And dedicate your life, whatever there's left of it, to Radha-giridhari, to service to Krishna. Anyways, it's a very long, drawn out, so sorry for being so drawn out. But all right, is there any last?
Talk about this Manik Shiksha edition without Urmila. It also has Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary in there.
Yeah.
So that's
a lot. Yeah. Yes, Tyler?
I had a couple just really quick questions. The first was, in the translation, it says that to date, none of the great kings and victorious leaders could follow this path of devotional service, not even mentally. So was this date before or after the rule of Lord Ram?
Before or after the rule of Lord Ram?
Yeah, as a king.
After or before? He's saying, was this statement that no one could follow this path to date?
None of the great kings or victorious
Was this before Lord Ram or after Lord Ram? After.
So that begs a question.
Sometimes, like they say that the conditioned soul is nityavada, eternally conditioned. It means it's so long, it's almost eternal. So when I heard that, this is just my. Sometimes it's to emphasize. Certainly, there are some rare souls. There are some great kings throughout time immemorial. Out there's some great souls, since great kings from time immemorial who've surrendered, but 99% just waste their life, waste their time. So I took it as it's like saying, well, nobody ever does this. Well, some people sometimes do it, but they're the very rare exception. So I read it in that context. It doesn't, anyone else wants to weigh in.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it's not that all the statements are absolute in the sense that like he's mentioning. So
Because I was hoping some did. Otherwise, it's like, man, what a path, right? You have all that facility. And my other questions are actually about that path. The first one was about the Bhagavad-gita translation that they had, where, okay, so the analogy I thought was, so out of many thousands of men, one may endeavor for perfection. It's like any sport team, right? You have the whole league. And then on each team, you have like an all-star, right? So out of many thousands of men in the league, one may endeavor for perfection, the all-star. And then all the all-stars go to the all-star game, and there's the most valuable player of the all-star game. So that's the one who has achieved perfection. But the question is, if you've achieved perfection, how is it that hardly one of those MVPs of the all-star game knows me in truth? They've achieved perfection, the highest state of perfect.
What do you
How
say,
do they
Druid?
hardly know him in truth?
I would take that, there's like Brahman realization is considered perfection. But it doesn't mean like Krishna's fuller, and fullest. You can understand, or Brahmaneti, Paramateti, Bhagavaneti, Shabite. You can realize the Supreme on different levels. I mean, there's people that, understand Brahman, but they don't understand Vaikuntha. There's people who understand Vaikuntha, but they don't understand Goloka. So that's the way I've always read that verse, that there's different levels of perfection.
Yeah.
So they're so expert at the game, they've gotten out of material nature, but they haven't gone to the, okay.
I mean, you have like you have a mango, right? There's the unripe mango. It's still a mango, but it hasn't completely, ripened, right? So, in other words, most people would say the most valuable thing is a ripe mango. And you could say that's someone who's someone who's attained perfection. Means, in some way, to live into the temple of Radhagiri Dari. I mean, that's a level of perfection, right? But there's also higher and higher levels, as Bhajanarayan Swami says. There's perfect, more perfect, most perfect. So, real perfection is to reach that highest level of God realization, love for Krishna. And lesser perfections are to realize, okay, I'm not the body, or, other people aren't the body, like Brahman realization or something like that. So,
By the way, that's how I looked at the Brahmacharya
You just
ashram.
read the purport. When you get to Bhagavad-gita, you can't read it now. It's not there in this purport.
Okay.
It's in the purport. It's very clear. The perfection in Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, as he's explaining,
Okay.
that's also perfection. But we know real perfection is pure bhakti, go back to Godhead. So that's the idea.
I want to ask one last one.
Yeah, that's how this is just a comment on that, was that I see the Brahmacharya ashram is like that. Like each city produces like an MVP, and we come to the ashram, right? Like we're the one of the many thousands of people in our city. Like the ashram has drafted each of us from our different cities, like one of us in each city. So it's just in the purport, he says, the path of devotional service is very difficult. Then he says, undoubtedly, the path of devotional service is very difficult. And then you're just this idea of following the path of Mahajan, giving us Śri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then he says this path is so simple and easy. And then he says at the end that, Americans and Europeans are taking this seriously and gradually attaining perfection. So we go from this path being difficult and undoubtedly very difficult, and now we have a new option. We have the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Prabhu, and now
Yeah.
it's become easy
Yeah.
and simple to follow.
Yeah.
So that doesn't change the fact that this is a very difficult path. We just got this nice intervention, this amazing mercy that made this path much easier for us by a benediction from him, right? The
Yes.
path is very tough, but we have the mercy of something very simple given to us to kind of help us on this very
Yeah,
difficult path.
therefore we always have to remember Lord Chaitanya. So we'll end with that.
Yeah.
Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that if one forgets Lord Chaitanya, easy things become very difficult. And if one remembers Lord Chaitanya, very difficult things become easy. So,
sky, a dumb man can sing poetry, and a lame man can cross the mullions.
Yes. So, we should always remember Shri Shri Gaurnitai. Gruntrad Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
By the way, Dr. Tyler, those are very good questions.